getting close. It's a fairly small crowd. Can I go without a microphone? In the back, can you hear me? Beautiful. If it becomes a problem or I get really quiet, let me know, but teaching outdoor education and starting out there, you tend to get your big outside voices, so we'll use that. I think there's like a minute left, maybe? Or are people ready to go? Ready to go. All right. I'd like to welcome you. My name is Ann Perry. Our session is one-to-one, the only way to go, and we sort of focused it with science. Both of us are science teachers. I've been a science teacher for about 13 years. I started in outdoor education. My tie to Minnesota is I worked at the Eagle Bluff Environmental Learning Center down in Lanesboro and worked with an alternative education class that came in from a school in Iowa, from Mount Pleasant. Fell in love with it and decided to go back for my teaching certification because I had started out just as a bio major. I was going to go out to a coastal area, and my life work eventually will be to swim with sharks. I have a fetish for sharks. I love them. So that was my original plan, but moving to Minnesota sort of changed my focus and got into education that way. So that's sort of my history.
My name is Robin Indermule. I grew up in northern Minnesota in a tiny little town called Deer River, and I love Minnesota. In fact, coming back looking at the cityscape was exciting for me. I went to school, high school there. I also went to St. Olaf College. I worked for 10 years at Teresa Romero Natural Resource Education Center, so we both have environmental background and now teach ecology, biology, life science at Northern Pines High School.
And so we're located in Eagle River, Wisconsin, which is, if you think of the middle of the state of Wisconsin, go north almost all the way to the upper Michigan border. So we're way northern Wisconsin. It's negative 25 there today, so we're thinking it's a balmy 25 as a high here today. We sort of follow the philosophy of ed camps. If this is not the session for you, if we get going and this is just not what you want, you will not offend us by getting up and leaving. So you've got feet. If that's what you need to do, go ahead and take off. We get it. It's not a problem. Why don't we go? Some of what we're presenting today, you're going to see student presentation and student work. And we found some things, and we'll talk about why it's kind of important to do things in this realm, but we found some mistakes, and so keep your eye out for them, and at the end we'll see if you can spot some of the same misconceptions that our students had and some of the same issues that they had as we found as we went through. So is one-to-one in science the only way to go? And the answer is, you're wrong. No matter which way you answer that question, there are always critics. There's going to be somebody telling you, you messed up. We'll come full circle here, but we now have a one-to-one initiative, and we're getting these parents going, why'd you pick the Chromebook as a device? It's a piece of garbage. And we're going, okay, we've had parent meetings, we've had pilots going, and so there's always going to be somebody. You have to find what works for you. And so we're going to sort of present today what you can do with whatever technology you currently have, and then give you a little bit of a view on our plan on how to get more technology if you want it. So that's kind of where we're going today.
We're super lucky at our school. We have a very supportive tech department that, and very progressive tech department. We've got tons of technology at our school. We've had for a long time. We're one of the first schools to go wireless. We have computer labs. We have computers on carts. And that was great, but our teachers are also awesome, and they were using that technology. And so we were fighting over labs, and there's a certain teacher, not that I'm bitter, that would sign up for the computer lab every Wednesday during 6th block for 3 months at a time, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So if I wanted to use it during my 6th block class...
What? English teacher?
No, actually,
No.
it's a world language teacher.
Oh,
And so if I wanted to use the computers, I had to sign up on Tuesday or Thursday or go up and try and work some sort of a deal. And our district saw that there were more and more of us using technology, and so we started to explore the one-to-one option. And the way that we did that is we started out with a pilot. And it was an iPad pilot. We had a cart of iPads. There were 25 of them, and they traveled from room to room at the high school. I was lucky enough in science to have a cart. It traveled to math after me, and then to social studies, and then to world languages at that time. It worked okay. It's great to have that technology, the research that could happen. We worked on collaborating with Google Docs and things like that. But it also was tough because iPads are not great multi-user devices. So we ran into some issues with that, which we'll talk about in a little bit. At one of our outlying elementary schools, we also had iPads where each teacher had 3 in their classroom. So that was another angle that we tried on getting technology into the classroom. And that worked out well, although they did end up putting them all together to bring technology into so that each student could have the technology too. So they worked it out amongst themselves, and that worked out well. And then there was another pilot where a third grade classroom in another outlying elementary school was able to have, her students were able to have iPads all day, every day. So they were their own devices. So those were 3 of the iPad pilots that we looked at. Some of the things that, like I said, that I loved about the iPad were that they were very interactive. So with the touch screen, the kids could move the chromosomes in mitosis, and they could see how that happened. They could actually do the dissections with the frog. They could listen, they could feel, they could move, and I felt that that was great. I love that aspect of it. Also the video capability, the being able to videotape labs, being able to record audio, and then iMovie and Pinnacle Studio were 2 apps that we use that are super easy for students to use. Probably milliseconds after I showed them, they were way ahead of where I was with that. So those are some of the things I really liked. Some of the things I didn't like I said, were the multi-user issue. Also, Apple doesn't always play nicely with a lot of web-based things, and so I had this great lesson I was super excited about. All right, go! And doesn't support Flash, doesn't support whatever.
This one doesn't work.
Exactly. All right, so let's punt. And that was something that could be frustrating. And then also, it was right when Google was coming in and the collaboration piece with using Google Docs and presentation and things like that. And the iPad, you have to do some finagling to get it to work well. It's pretty limited with the apps that they have. So that was a learning curve also.
And other pilots that were going on in the district is, I'm a wanderer, so I apologize if I talk to your backs. The middle school had a set of netbooks that were in a classroom full-time, and then because of this one user issue with the iPad, a student would log in, do their work in Google Drive or in Google Docs. They would send that cart to a new classroom, and somebody had access to another student's, all their information and data. And because of this issue with it, we looked at the Chromebooks were becoming very popular, and so our tech director said, well, you've been big on looking at Google, and I've been on Google's bandwagon for about 5 or 10 years now, and when they were talking about a one-to-one implementation, I was like, yes, Chromebooks or Google, and he's like, oh, well, we're gonna look at iPads and other things, and I was a little disheartened. So we ended up coming back to the idea of Chromebooks because of that multi-user function. And I got a set of Chromebooks in my classroom, 30 of them, no fancy cart, they sat in Rubbermaid tubs, and I got them, we were in a block schedule, so I had them 3 blocks a day, and then they traveled to another teacher's classroom for the block that I was on prep. And so those were the pilots that we went on. The Chromebook, the advantages, if we look at pros and cons, my 2 favorite things about the Chromebook were the multi-user sign-on. That device could be logged off, sent to a new student, they log in, they have all of their stuff. And that leads right into my second favorite thing about that. Using the Google Chrome platform, they sign in, all of their documents, all of their resources, all of their bookmarks are theirs no matter what device they have in their hands. How many times have you run into, oh, well, I have that at home on my computer and I brought it to school and it's in the wrong font or it's in the wrong program or I don't have the USB stick. And so we got rid of all those excuses because I would say to my students, oh, it's there, just go log in on any device they were in. Things I did not like about the Chromebooks, we have the less expensive model. We bought the $250 Samsung model, and they are a little bit tender, and so a lot of taking care of them was a big issue. Putting them back in the labs, I'm always going, okay kids, that's an open flame, please move your Chromebook at least 12 inches away. But they're taking data and keeping things going. Second thing that I really disliked about the Chromebooks were the camera capabilities. There's tons of great video editing and those types of things out there. We had iPads in our classrooms before. We went to Chrome, and the only camera on our model was a self-facing camera. So for kids to videotape what they were doing, they're holding the Chromebook. I'll go and grab one. So they're doing this, and they're going, oh, well, I'm going to take pictures and save these pictures of the lab dissection we're doing so I can study from them later. And then the kid is doing this, you know, trying to point the camera at what we're looking at. And so I'm watching things, you know, terrified that it's going to hit and splat. And the cat juices over the Chromebook's not good. So, I'm going to go ahead with this.
Yep. One of the things that I think we've tried to keep in mind as a district is there such thing as too much technology? We've got the graphing calculators, we've got the iPads, we've got the Chromebooks, we've got cell phones, we've got Kindles, we've got all kinds of things going on, and is there a point where it gets to be too much? And I think that's something that we as educators really need to keep in the forefront, is why are we using that technology? Are we using that technology to enhance education, or are we using it because it looks cool? And so I think that's something that we really need to think about as we're going forward. And this is something I actually personally witnessed. It leads to student frustration when they're asked to do all these things on technology, but it's something that maybe is easier for them with a pencil and a paper. Or maybe they want to make a poster. They want to use their creative talents and use their hands, and they want to sculpt something. Or they want to go outside. They don't want a virtual field trip. They actually want to go out and touch and feel and smell. So I think that's important to make sure that you keep with that, and make sure you think about that too when you're planning your technology.
Our plan for getting technology, before our school went with a one-to-one initiative and we were looking at these pilots, our science department we're a department of 4, it's in flux right now, wanted to put probeware in our students' hands. Labs like photosynthesis labs, fish respiration based on water temperature and those kinds of things. And the kids are sitting there struggling to read the thermometer. And they have completely lost the fact that as temperature changes, fish respiration changes because dissolved oxygen is changing. And they're worried about, well, is this 22 or 21? And when it says 21, then I have to... And they were getting so wrapped up in the silly thermometer. Don't get me wrong, learning how to read a scale, very important, graduate cylinder, measurements, all of those things are skills. But when the focus is taken off of what the focus is supposed to be on, because they're so stuck in using sort of an antiquated device. I mean, I have 2 children. I have never picked up an alcohol thermometer with my children. It's been digital my entire life. Why am I expecting my students to use an alcohol thermometer when the digital ones are there? So we were trying to get these things called probeware, basically things like digital temperature probes, make the labs a lot easier and those kinds of things. So this is what our science department wanted to go with. And it's a fairly expensive outlay. When you first start getting these devices, you have to have some sort of device that it talks to. And so you buy the software and everything else. And so we're looking at an outlay of a couple $1,000s. And of course we thought we were going to get this, well, okay, we just want 6. We want 1 for each lab station. We'll get this running basic probeware. And so we wrote a grant and we were denied. And we wrote another grant.
Denied.
We talked to our administration.
Denied.
And then we had to come up with Plan B. And what Plan B was figuring things out. I was a recipient of a fellowship award and was given $1,000 at my discretion to spend for my school district. And I said, oh, well, we can get some iPads with us. This will be great. Okay, what can you do with 2 iPads? And a year later, our now tech coach, one of our tech coaches, also received the fellowship because I know you guys are looking for these iPads. We've got to work something out here. You can have my $1,000 if you're going to use them in the classroom. I went, now wait a minute, now we're up to 4. We get 2 more. And so the tech department and the science department are on pretty good terms because we're kind of in that techie realm. So I said, hey, we've got funding for 4 iPads. Would you be willing to get us 6 iPads, or 2 more iPads to make it 6, so we could have 1 at each lab station? And the tech department said they agreed to that. Then we went to our administration and we said, okay, we've got 6 iPads. We have found the funding for 6 iPads. We need these little things that link the probes to the iPads so that we're not taking our iPads into the water with waders to try and find our, to try and measure temperature and things like that. And would you pay for that if we pay for the probeware out of our science budget? So that's what we did. And then also we're thinking, iPads need cases. In science, we want them in the lab. We don't want them to be at their tables and then they have to run back and forth. We want them in the lab. So we got the survivor cases for them, which I know are not bulletproof, but have, when you spill water on them, it's pretty easy to wipe them off quickly and things like that. That money came out of a
fundraising fund that we have for science. So we pieced together from multiple places to try and get this to happen. And I would really suggest that was the only way that we were going to happen, because when we came with the full budget, everywhere we went, they said no. But when we showed them that we really would work hard, that we would put some of our own money into it, that we would, sacrifice some of the things that we had, that seemed to work for us.
So we say we would have you come away with a plan for getting technology. The plan is beg, borrow, and do everything but steal. We ended up with 5 different funding sources: 2 fellowship grants, tech department, administration, our science department budgets, and some activity and fundraising. So we put it together from all those places, and we're still currently building up. We could only purchase at the onset temperature probes. Well, that doesn't take care of but half of the labs you do in your classroom. And so every year out of our science budget, we've continued to build up that base of probeware, but depending on what the science classrooms want and what they need in the departments and in the school. Yeah, we can go here. Let's see. This is just a slide to show you that it's not pretty either. As our Chromebooks, the Chromebooks are on the upper left. Again, they were in, and still are, in one of our other teachers' classrooms. In those nice little Rubbermaid totes, they get hooked up to big electrical power strips in the back of her classroom. This was and is we call them our SciPads, because we think we're science geeks and nerds. So they're our SciPads, and they're not pretty. They're, the cords are hanging all over, and this is how we carted them here. We literally took these tubs, put them in a rolling basket, and that's how we got them here with us. So if you're willing to give away a little bit of the aesthetics, you can also save a little bit on your outset of the money in that regard. So our journey along the way. Okay, so you don't have any technology. What do you do? Or you piece these things together. What if we'd only gotten those 2 iPads to begin with? What can you possibly do with just 1 or 2 devices in your classroom? And with 1 device, the sound's not important if it doesn't roll.
This is a very exciting field trip to the landfill. And I just took this last week. One of my students decided that it was a good idea when it was a wind chill of 20 below to come to school in shorts. The landfill building is not heated, and so I decided, well, this is a good use for our iPad. We'll take a video of the field trip, and then I can bring that back to him, since I didn't want him to have frostbite on his legs. We also had a few students that were absent, so that was another thing that we could do, is we could have that for our students that were absent. Another thing that I've thought of is that I really like to go on field trips. My environmental ed has taught me that hands-on and getting out into the environment is the best way to teach. Transportation is expensive. And so what I've been trying to do is look at, okay, well, if I take this class to the landfill, I can take this class to the wastewater treatment plant. You're going, yeah, I want to really be in that class. I'm on the field trip. And I can take this class to the recycling center, and I can videotape each of those, and then I can share that with the other classes, so each can go on 3 field trips, 1 real and 2 virtual. So that's another thing we can look at. If you take a look, there's the app in the corner, and so we're just showing what platform we've used, whether it's Apple or Chrome, and then also we'll have some of the apps that we have used just for your reference. Another thing is the Google Jockey. This is Jacob. He's my Google Jockey for 2nd period. In your classes, you will have a kid who just wants to know those things. They're curious. They want to know when you say, "Boy, I'm not sure about that," or "We should look that up," or "What do you think if?" or "Do you think this is?" There will be some kid that'll look that up. And whether you have a device that you can give to that kid and say, "Here, look it up," or you let them use their phones or whatever it is, it's fun, because a lot of times a couple minutes later, "Oh, wait a minute, here's the answer to this," and then that can lead to great discussion. I found some great resources actually this way too, with having students do that.
Also, this is one of those really, really important ways of putting the students in the center of their education, no longer being this teacher, the sage on the stage with all the answers. The "I don't know," one of my favorite science quotes, "If you think you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong." The kids have to understand that, especially in science, but it puts them in charge of what they're trying to figure out. So you give them that opportunity. Just click off. There we go. This was a favorite of mine. She did this lab. The cell size, the egg diffusion osmosis lab. Have you ever taken this? You put the egg in, you put it in vinegar, and you dissolve the shell, and you watch this thing grow and shrink. And it's supposed to be a model of what a cell does over time as you're changing the solute concentrations. And so the students had to do a video documented lab. The app is called iMotion HD. So they set up an interval. You can see every once in a while the kids picked it up and they were videotaping or clicking and taking pictures of what they were doing, taking the measurements. But we condensed a 3-day, well, I didn't, Robin did, condensed this 3-day lab into a 45-second video. The kids can see the cell size changing because of diffusion and osmosis. Want to take it, Jackie?
Oh yeah, if anybody would like to volunteer to be a Google Jockey, if you want to look up what is the difference between osmosis and diffusion, because that's the osmosis and diffusion lab. If somebody would like to do that, feel free to raise your hand and come to that.
I have a sneaking suspicion that half of our audience already knows those things. What? That's okay.
I just have a question with the iMotion HD.
Yes.
Did they continually record throughout, because we've used it too, did they continually record throughout that whole day then with the iPad just sitting there?
Yes.
And did they take like just every couple minutes or?
It was like every half hour maybe,
Okay.
or something like
We
that.
did have a picture.
And we kept a light on it because we have automatic lights that turn off, and we have very conscientious janitors that come in and turn the lights off. So we had a light on it. It was great. We had a lab stool
upside down.
Okay.
With the,
No tripod.
I should take a picture actually of the system that we use. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But,
Again, making it work because we don't have fancy tripods that'll flip over. So we thought, oh, we'll figure this out. So it took a little doing, but it got done. And depending, I know Mark Prensky just talked about it, depending on the school policies, don't discount those cell phones. They are super important. The students are hooked up to them anyways. Our district has gone through a huge growing pains of no cell phones in the classroom to teacher discretion to that they have them anyways. And so, you know, the whole thing about blocking them off the internet, they're going to get on the internet regardless of what you do, they'll figure it out. They're the best at hacking everything out. So don't discount those cell phones. A lot of potential use for them. Quick example, one of my students, I teach a upper level anatomy class. We're in the middle of cat dissections. They have to learn 50 muscles. They only have a few weeks to do it in. And she was gone for a week, which in regular schedule is like 2 weeks of class, which is a third of the unit. And her lab partner took pictures of me doing the demos, of me, videotaped me talking through some of it, annotated the pictures on her cell phone, said this is this muscle. She would outline them and then label them, make 3 or 4 copies of these pictures, send them to her. So at least when she came back, she had a working understanding of what we were talking about. She had to see it and get the hands onto it, but she wasn't 2 weeks behind. She was maybe 2 or 3 days of practical application behind. So what if you get a couple more devices in your hands?
this is again with iMotion HD. And it's this would be using the stop motion feature of that, so you can take pictures of, at certain times. And so this is showing my mitosis. So the students were actually able to use the manipulatives and put it at certain sections and then replay it so that they could see it happening. And this is something that with the 3 iPad, you could do this as with 1 iPad and have that as a station in your labs. We could do it as 3 and have them then switch to different activities. You can use it as differentiation. You could give them choice as to how do they want to learn mitosis. Do they want to learn it this way? Do they want to do worksheets? Do they want to watch a video? Those types of things.
Another thing, if you only have a few devices, and this is what Robin was just alluding to, is you can set up rotational stations. Budget crunches and those types of things, sometimes we don't have enough materials for every student in our class to have that authentic hands-on. And so I've done some rotational labs. This is a bacterial lab setup. You can see 3 of the stations are iPads. One of them is on an app where they're learning about bacterial quorum sensing and how bacteria converse with one another. At a second iPad, the one up in the middle of the screen, they're playing a game where they are a virus and they're learning about the immune system. But they're acting as a virus and they are trying to evade the cell's defenses and get through this game. In the bottom right-hand corner, they are identifying bacterial cells by DNA sequencing. So they're looking at some of the application of DNA sequencing in the realm of bacteria. The other lab stations were things like the slimiest plate lab. You've probably done this, where you swab different areas, you try and culture bacteria. The kids obviously think things like door handles are the worst, and it's usually their telephones that have the most bacteria on them. The upper right-hand corner microscope, looking at the shapes of bacteria. Upper left, I think we're modeling different viruses and some of the other activities that we did. So set those things up in a rotational lab. In a rotational lab setting.
What what can you do with 6 to 8 devices? So now that you're getting to the point where you can have one per lab station, which is nice. One of the things that we did.
You're not going to hear the sound on this one, unfortunately. We didn't plug in our sound. There were little tech issues when we first got here. But the student is going through and describing, okay, we're looking at the grasshopper here. It has an exoskeleton. It's made, and he said it's made of chitin. But so he was going through talking about this. This is phenomenal formative assessment. This was his lab report. Why should this student, I mean, they had labeled diagrams to work along with, but why should this student write up a huge conclusion when I can tell right here if they understand the anatomy we're looking at? The other thing we would do with things like this, it would be super nice, again, in those budgetary crunches, when I go through the advanced invert section, we do the earthworm together, and in the past, every lab group of 2 kids would do a grasshopper, a crayfish, and a clam. That gets to be fairly expensive. You're buying a lot of materials when you're doing 6 and 7 sections of biology here. So what I did was a comparative advanced invert lab. And so 2 of the students would do the crayfish at a table, the other 2 would do the grasshopper. They would videotape and then teach each other. I'm using half as many materials. The students are accessing technology, and this is where it becomes really important. Are we doing this just because it looks cool and the kid has it videotaped? No, I'm doing it to save money. I'm doing it for all those other reasons. And in the teaching of their process, if you know that you have to tell everybody else, and then those kids look together and go, oh, well, this is the same in the grasshopper, the crayfish. I don't have to tell them that. They're doing that part of it. And so we go back to that in that Robin said at the beginning about, are we really changing the learning, or are we just using it to make cool videos?
Another thing that's really important when they know there's an audience besides just me, for me they don't care, but if they know that their peers are seeing it, that's one thing. They're going to step it up. They're going to say, okay, I need to know what I'm talking about, or I'm going to look like an idiot. And I don't want to look like an idiot in front of my peers. So that's something too that you can get better results from them, and better understanding. Again, I know that when I teach, I have to know it to teach it. It's the same with them. They need to know it if they're going to teach it to somebody else.
And a sideline note for the kids that hate doing the dissections, they will always be your first to volunteer to do the videotaping. And are they watching it and getting it? You better believe it.
Something else that we've done, which is really nice, is to be able to QR code. Sometimes we'll have a student in charge of videotaping a lab or a lecture or something to that effect. They're responsible for creating QR or uploading it to a site like YouTube or a video site of some sort, and then QR coding it and then putting it on the calendar. So the grasshopper dissection was done on the 6th of December. We put that QR code on the calendar so students that are gone that day can have a QR code reader either on their phones or on a device that they have, can then review that and take a look at. They can learn it if they were absent. If there's a test coming up, they can review some of those things. They can look at it again. They can stop and start and rewind to things that they don't understand. And so that's a powerful tool also.
Great for your field trips as well. We QR code our field trip videos and put those up on calendars.
These are my students. We went out on a tracking workshop, or a tracking field trip, and what I wanted them to do is look at animals that they thought they might see tracks of out in the wild. And so, behind school, not in the wild. But, so they use their cell phones. I could have had them take their Chromebooks out, except it was kind of a blizzard that day. Chromebooks probably wouldn't handle real well. Dropping in the snow is not good for them. They're going to have their phones anyway. If they can have that information pulled up anyway, they can take pictures of the tracks if they have questions of them. I had them look up things like what are some other signs that you might see from those animals. The one thing, again, you Google jockeys, if you look at it's probably hard to see, but the 4th float from the left, are jackalopes native to Wisconsin? I don't know. That was one of my students who thought that was
Cute.
yeah.
And here we are at what our original intention was, data collection. If you remember, that's why we wanted to get these devices in our students' hands. And so yeah, when you have those at every lab station, it's really helpful for that data collection. Calorimer lab, temperature again became an issue. The kids were so bent on when we hit the highest temperature of that water, digitally it's just so much faster to see. And so that data collection piece is big. We can go right on to it. This leads right into your data sharing and as well as calculations. We have a new charter school this year. They had a beautiful grant. We begged, borrowed, and didn't steal for all of our probeware materials. They got it in their grant right away. So they called us and said, well, you guys have this iPad and these probeware things. Teach us how to use them. We said, okay, when do we get to come out and help the kids use them? And so between our two schedules, I was the lucky one. I got to go up to Bond Falls.
Denied again.
I got to go to Bond Falls with 40 of our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders and show them how to use this Probeware. But the data sharing became really important because I couldn't take another day. My administrator was like, really, you're going to go up and help them? What about your students? And I said, well, they'll be fine. I went up and couldn't get the second day to go over our actual what we found. So we took data in the field. Now what do you do with it? And obviously that's a really important piece as you're teaching these budding young scientists. So they have a Polycom set up at the charter school, which is about 20 miles north of the high school. Robin and I sat over our lunch and our prep, and we did a Google Hangout with them. So the kids saw us on their Polycom. They have their own Chromebooks in their hands at that time, but it could have been just on the screen. And they were sharing, they were reading out of their lab notebooks where they had done their data collection. And so we did all of our data entry and data sharing together and talked about what conclusions can you come up with. This happened to be a stream study. Additionally is the calculations. I can't get over some of my students. I know Mark Prensky said the kids know what to do with this stuff. Lots of times they do, but they are also getting somewhat, when I get to the high school level, they're getting bent in their ways. Okay, I've got this set of data, we need an average. And they will whip out their cell phone and go to the calculator and start plugging away. I'm going, guys, we put this in a Google spreadsheet. Learn how to make a formula. And they're looking at me like, huh? Some of them have no conception of that. I'm going, well, we can save oodles of time and be accurate. And again, get to the point of what we're looking at rather than spend all this time going board. Okay, group 1, would you please tell me what you got? And writing on the board. Okay, group 2, how about you? What was your data? And then pulling all that data, and then kids make mistakes. Oh wait, no, that was session 3 instead of session 2. And I can't tell you how many times I've wasted 30 and 40 minutes just trying to get the kids' data pulled together. And so the data sharing and the calculations of them is huge. I'm obviously very excited about that topic. I'm very animated.
All right, so now if you're getting closer, you're getting 1 device per 2 students, device per pair, which is actually, before we went to the 1-to-1, that's what our goal was to try and get 12 of the iPads in the science department, or up to actually having 1-to-1. Here's some things that we've done.
And one thing that we should mention is obviously you can go back and do anything with 3 devices and 6 devices, but you have a little bit more option. Instead of having my students go through a list of the lab rules in my classroom, they have to cartoon what they believe are lab rules. So this is Toon-Do. They had to create a 3-frame comic strip. What are the rules of the science classroom? So you and your partner, your lab partner, we do this on the day they pick lab partners. What do you think are the important rules? And then as a class, they have to decide, and then we share our cartoons and we talk about them. If you can't see it, this one basically talks about not reading directions before you start the lab and what happens to you. Interactives and tutorials. You saw 3 of them when I had the 6 rotational labs set up, and 3 of them had iPads. Obviously, if you have more iPads, more devices, you're putting it closer into the student's hands so you can go back and use those interactives and tutorials. So again, I would use that quorum sensing when I teach bacteria, but I'd have 2 kids looking at it instead of rotating around a lab now. So you can modify some of those things. This one happens to be a genetic decoder. It basically gives a brief introduction of the amino acids, their chemical structures. The kids can put in the codons and it spits out what amino acid would be coded for. So if you remember the big lengthy charts, again, using that, showing them how to use it important, but if you're really looking at amino acid sequences, do we need to spend that much time when we could have a device help us out with it?
Sorry. I can't do the clicker, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm technically challenged. Anyways, another thing that I've done in my classes, I ran a little short when I got to animals at the end of the year. So to cover vertebrates, we have a display case in our lobby of our school, and our administrator was wondering if we could have some sort of education that the science department could do. So I thought, well, this is a great way to quickly cover vertebrates. And what I had them do is each choose an animal, and then they had specifics that they needed to research on it. They needed to create a haiku poem, I think, and things like that. And we put them in a wiki. I use wiki spaces. And then what I did is I QR coded each of the pages, and then put the QR code. You can kind of see the picture there, the QR code below the animal. That way, people that were coming into our building, that were waiting for the auditorium to open, that were in between, at intermission time, maybe at a basketball game, whose kids were crazy, they needed to come in and run around the lobby a little bit, could then use the QR code to look up some information, hopefully learn something, and make our displays a little more interactive.
So this is the QR code to the black bear, and so you can see I just gave a small piece of the screenshot of the information that would be there. So they're pulling that information together. And finally we got there. Our district did end up this past fall going one-to-one. We had students on the first couple days actually open up their Chromebook boxes, they put their labels on, they logged in for the first time, we got them updated in our network. Our district, and our tech director, our tech coach just walked out of the room, our district went a little belly up on this one. We did Haiku as a content management system, we introduced Google Drive and Gmail, and we gave every kid a Chromebook in the high school in one year. 2 days of optional training this summer. So our teachers are doing a phenomenal job of really trying to get caught up. We did have the district finally back off as far as the teacher expectations, and it was, well, they should be using technology to enhance learning. Okay, how and what do you expect? And so we got them to come up with, at the first outset, we have a lot of students and they have a real issue with keeping track of their assignments. So one of the first things we did is every teacher must have so many assignments. By the end of the first semester, you're putting your assignments in Haiku, so the kids have basically a digital planner with all their due dates and a big calendar. So we sort of have met in the middle on that one. But hopefully you've gotten to see a little bit of on that way up to, yes, now we do have one-to-one. We're a very fortunate district. Despite the kids throwing them across the room like frisbees occasionally in frustration. It doesn't happen too often, but we've gotten there. But that's not where it has to be. So if we go back to that initial question, I think we're on the next slide. Is one-to-one the only way? Oh, hey, not yet. Is one-to-one the only way? It really, truly isn't necessarily the only way. There's so many things you can do with a cell phone in your pocket. You just have to be willing to let your students have your cell phone and take a video of it. And they'll see that go on. It's kind of big. I think we can go on. So did you find any of our science mistakes? Flip to the next one and see if we can give a hint. Take this cell through meiosis.
3 chromosomes.
3 chromosomes, non-existent kind of cell. Again, the students were using these manipulatives. Great formative assessment. Okay, have that kid. I saw your video, let's set this up again. Great, mitosis, you did a wonderful job, I can see all the stages. Now put it through meiosis since we're on that unit. And they'll get to that part where they're doing the pairs of chromosomes, and they'll be like, wait a minute. And so that opens up that discussion. Obviously, you're gonna have an even number of chromosomes to have a pair of chromosomes. This one, I sort of gave it up to, the pronunciation was kitten instead of chitin, so all sorts of interesting things. The last thing that we said we would do is give you apps to take away. And so we've sort of shown you along the way what they are. One of my favorite things is I ended up doing a presentation. I sat this morning in a presentation, he's like, just do a presentation for me, but it cannot be PowerPoint. I hate PowerPoint. I did the same thing with my students. I did what Mark said, surprised me. Find something I haven't seen before and tell me if it works. Got a lot of Globsters, a lot of voice threads. A lot of kids that tried to do a PowerPoint, upload it to SlideShare, then tell me it wasn't a PowerPoint. I went, nice try. But we're doing Google. So prepare to be amazed. One of my students found this. It's in beta right now, but it's called eMaze. It sets up just like PowerPoint or slides, but then all the transitions are automatic, and they're pretty cool. Are we not censored? Yeah, I think we'll be okay. So these are just some of the apps we saw. I'm not going to describe every single one. We talked about this one, iMotion HD, stop motion photography, time-lapse photography. I actually set this one up in my house to watch my Christmas tree open. I have an 8-year-old who loves anything technology, and so we put the Christmas tree was bound up, and she was watching the branches. Well, Mom, why are they doing that? So we had this discussion. So I set up my iPad, set it for every 5 seconds, and then we had a 15-second video of the tree unfolding, and she thought that was the coolest thing. One of the ones that I used for the 3 rotational labs on bacteria, Howard Hughes Medical Institute has a ton of different resources out there. They have an app for the iPad called Click and Learn. And HHMI's Click and Learn has a number of tutorials and sessions and information that they will give to you. And so the bacterial quorum sensing came from that. A great resource, a lot of extension for upper level as far as the high school level is concerned. I don't know that I'd give a lot of it to my middle school students in our district, but excellent resources.
Virulent is a fun game. It's where you're looking at, you're a virus and you're trying to break down the cell's defenses and figure out how to do that. And so the gamification that, looking at how do you figure out how to break down the cell's defenses, in doing that you need to figure out what the cell's defenses are, and so are learning that way.
Back to Howard Hughes Medical Institute. The identification lab, they have a number of virtual labs. The one that I showed was the bacterial identification through DNA sequencing. I want to say they have 3 or 4 other really good ones, and so you can just search those out. Those are pretty nice.
I tell you, technically challenge of cooking.
Is anyone not familiar with TED? Enough said. I think we just go on. Toondoo is the one to make cartoons with. I saw that one in a presentation this morning at the 50 and 50 this morning at 8 o'clock. He presented Toondoo as well. Really easy to use, really easy to navigate for the students, and they get a kick out of being able to put together that comic strip. Tons of applications for it.
Biology Pop is just a conglomeration of a lot of different interactive web tools, videos, tutorials, graphics, information, things like that. So you can find really anything you want to do. Just make sure you proof it first, because it may not be the level you're looking at, or it may not be quite as scientifically accurate as maybe you want it to be.
A lot of it's what's trending, what you're hearing. Good vetted sources in some of them, but I've also found some stuff that's sort of like, I don't think I want to go that route. We talked about the genetic decoder. It's just one of a plethora of genetic devices out there. It was a fairly simple one, so we like that for our tutorial. Go Animate, take the Toondoo and take it up a notch. Has anybody seen Go Animate before? Okay, a couple of you. Go Animate has Go Animate for schools. You log in, it's free. You set your characters, your scenes. So it's a little bit bigger than just a comic strip. You can change from scene to scene. You choose from a pool of characters. You give them voices. You can either type in what you want them to say, and you get great little computer voices that kick it back to you. You can also record your own voice, overlay, and they'll move the mouth somewhat to what it should look like. And then when you're done, you have this short animation of a process, a concept. So that idea of moving through items and through material, have your kids animate some of those things.
One of the things too that we wanted to talk about, and I just thought of it, is that probably somewhere in your district you'll have that person who is an app geek and are on the sites where you get the free apps, and it's free today and it's whatever else. We happen to have one sitting in this room right now. But anyway, if you can get them to email out when those things are free, what we got Pinnacle Studio and iMovie free on our iPads, because they were free for one day. We got the email, we grabbed the iPads, she took half, I took the other half, and we're downloading them, and so now we have them for free. So if you have that person and there is that person somewhere, tap into them and have them share with you when those apps are free, or there's lots of websites and actually apps for telling you when the apps are free, to look at that.
Yeah, utilize those, because we haven't paid. We've only paid for one on the SciPads that we use in the classroom, and that happened to be, the reason we went with this version of Proware is because they had a free iPad app, and it rots. It locks up, it dumps on us, and so we ended up purchasing their souped up version, and it's been much more useful and a lot. So unfortunately, the reason we got it is why we had to finally buy it, but what are you gonna do? Favorite site of mine, games and interactives. Nobel Institute, it's all educational. They're based on Nobel Prize awarded achievements, basically. One of my favorite games in this one is the blood typing game. So I teach my students about blood typing. We actually do the finger prick, they can look at their blood type, and they have those questions, well, who can get what kind of blood? They're always interested in it. And there's the blood typing game. 3 victims, it's all animated. 3 victims come in from a car crash. You have to type their blood, so they give you microscopic views of what the blood looks like with the different serums that have been added. You have to determine their blood type, and then you have to hang bags of blood on their IVs to keep them alive. And so say, okay, you got that one right, and he needs another bag. What else can you give him? And so you have to give different victims different numbers of bags. And of course, if you kill them, it's not good. And so at the end, they tell you if you're going to be a good nurse or not. And my kids, I will set the kids up on that one, and I have to yank them, high school juniors and seniors. And they'll play it over and over again. I mean, the game doesn't change, guys. It's the same 3 victims, and I know, but, and so they like that one a lot. And that's one of probably 50 or 60 games and interactives they have on that site. And then that gets into the neither here nor there. We sort of talked about when we wrote this, we said, we're going to give them 8 iPad apps and 8 Chromebook apps and let them run. So many things are web-based that they're neither here nor there as far as that app for the Apple versus the Chromebook. Wisconsin Center for Academically Talented Youth, WICAD, has a web page they call Hoarded Links. And if you get to our presentation, it's linked there. The QR code will also take you to it. It's not a pretty web page. They have a couple pictures across the top, but they have housed 50 games and tutorials and activities for how to think like a historian. 50 games, web tutorials, how to think like a researcher, how to be a critical thinker. And then those are like 5 different topics, and then at the bottom of that, 10 web pages that every educator must know. And then there's another list of links of these vetted links. Phenomenal resources. I have gotten lost on that website for long times. Still have to find everything, but so many of those games, and you're going to find a lot of those will link you to apps for surgery games. And surgery games is an app that will open up, 20 or 30 different surgery games. So you have to sort of dive into them, but great things out there.
Khan Academy, I'm sure you're all familiar with. There's apps both on the Chromebook and the iPad for Khan Academy. Sponge Lab is another one that's, there's an app at Chrome, which basically gets you to the website of Sponge Lab, which is a lot like Biology Pop. It has a lot of different interactive tutorials, those types of things, lesson plans.
Sponge Lab, I think, a little bit more toward the middle and elementary level. I didn't find as much high school content there, but we thought we'd put them all there for you. What do you think of eMaze as a presentation tool? Do you like it? I kind of liked it.
What is Prezi?
It is, and it's like kicked up Prezi a little bit. Prezi you have to set, well now Prezi has the templates where you can follow the paths. Originally when Prezi first came out, you had to set your path, and they didn't give you the slides on the bottom. And so I used to spend hours getting lost and setting up my Prezis. This one sets them up like slides on the side, and there's a whole bunch of themes, and they're pretty cool. So
super easy, and looks impressive. We decided, because we're not procrastinators at all, we decided, I think it was about probably 10 o'clock on Friday night, like this Friday.
why
that we
just
should do this.
eMaze that big?
Yeah, so we're there. So it was pretty quick.
At this point, are there any questions from anybody out there? We do have, yes.
So once your students got Chromebooks, they're individual Chromebooks, right?
Yes,
You still kept the iPads in the room for things like the back camera and things like that?
absolutely. I think, one of the screens that was up at the beginning of this eMaze was iPad or Chromebook. What do you want the kids to do? And that's one of the hardest things when we were talking about training our teachers. Well, what should I do? Well, what do you want the kids to do? Because that sort of determines the best path that you're going to end up taking. And so the two of us are pretty much multi-user. Hey, the app works really good for this on Apple. Chrome has nothing to compare. Pull those iPads out. And so that's why we're working toward, we have currently 10 in the science department. We're working on getting those last 2 so that we can put one in every 2 children's hands if we're doing a lab with some of those apps and tutorials. HHMI has a great website that'll link you to some of those materials, not as intuitive as just grabbing the iPad and opening up the app and having all that material at your fingertips. There's a little more searching if you do it in Chrome. So I prefer, in that case, to go that way.
There's no perfect device. And so we found that using the strengths of each device, it works well for us.
Needing to go out into the field, the kids have to have their cell phones. You're not going to want them to have a big device in their hands as they go out. And, hey, what's this track? Well, I don't know. Here, let me unload my laptop here. So be flexible.
That's huge, being flexible.
We're right up to the end. I think there's about 2 or 3 minutes left. We were going to do a demo of some of the Proware. If people want to see it, you can come on up, but we're sort of going to let you go 2 minutes early even. But thank you very much.